Check, check, check.
Test 1, 2, 3. French channel, please.
This is the English channel, the interpreter speaking. Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that good? Should I go to the French?
Go to the French.
Oh.
That good for the interpreters?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our special joint committee meeting today, Wednesday, April 9th. We acknowledge that Ottawa is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. I'll ask the committee coordinator to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Luloff,
Good afternoon.
Councillor Dudas,
I'm here.
Councillor Curry,
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh, Councillor Tierney,
Present.
Councillor Troster,
Here.
Councillor Brockington,
Here.
Councillor Kitts,
Here.
Councillor Lowe,
Here.
Vice Chair Gower,
Here.
Chair Leeper,
Here.
and Chair Brown.
I'm here. Thank you very much. Both Councillors Johnson and Kelly sent their regrets for the meeting today. This is a special public meeting to discuss the revisions that may be required to the official plan of the City of Ottawa to ensure consistency with the provincial planning statement as set forth in item 4.1 on today's agenda. To submit written comments on these amendments for consideration by City Council on the 16th of April 2025, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, just an information point here. The joint meeting minutes of March 31st, which was last Monday, will be confirmed at our joint meeting on the 18th of June. Item 4.1, update on the Provincial Planning Statement 2024 Consistency Review. I know we've got a staff presentation and a few delegations, so I guess I'll turn it over to city staff.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce the Joint Committee, Lorraine Stevens. She is a senior planner within the policy planning section, and she'll be walking us through a presentation. She wanted to note that today is a special meeting under the Planning Act for this type of amendment. There's no amendments before joint committee today. We can consider this more of a scoping sort of meeting where staff will just walk joint committee through the high level areas of the PPS that we will be looking at, and should joint committee adopt the recommendations before them today, staff will then draft the amendments under those sections to be consistent with the PPS and begin the public consultation. So I'll turn it over to Lorraine to go through the presentation.
Thank you, Royce. I'm here to present on the Provincial Planning Statement Consistency Review. Next slide. The 2024 Provincial Planning Statement, which I'll refer to as the PPS 2024, replaces the 2020 Provincial Policy Statement. Our official plan is currently consistent with the 2020 Provincial Policy Statement. The PPS 2024 has been in effect since October last year. It provides direction on matters related to land use planning in Ontario, and the PPS is implemented through the city's official plan. Staff are required to review the city's official plan to determine if any amendments are required. Next slide. As per the Planning Act, we are required to hold a special meeting where we, from a high level, are to consider revisions to the official plan that may be required. And we must also consider written and oral submissions and discussion of the public. This meeting satisfies that requirement. At this point, we are not recommending specific amendments. There will be a second public meeting for Joint Committee to consider the amendments tentatively in June. Between now and then, we need to consider input from today's meeting, draft amendments, and begin consultation, including a public house on June 2nd, and finalize a list of proposed amendments for committee consideration. Next slide. The main categories for consideration are settlement area expansions, strategic growth areas, major transit areas, employment areas, and agriculture. Next slide. The first category is for settlement area expansions. Private applications for settlement area expansions are now permitted, whereby previously they could only occur through a comprehensive review initiated by city staff, which usually occurs every 5 years. We will need to amend policies that establish how the city will maintain a sufficient supply of land to accommodate projected growth. Amendments to the official plan will largely reflect the council direction from the report that came forward to Joint Committee in October of last year for the new urban and village boundary expansion official plan application process. Next slide. The second category is for strategic growth areas. The province has added a new section in the PPS 2024 for strategic growth areas and have included policies in other sections. As per the PPS 2024, strategic growth areas are defined as within settlement area nodes, corridors, and other areas that have been identified by municipalities to be the focus for accommodating intensification and higher density mixed uses in a more compact built form. The strategic areas identified by the province closely align with our current OP policies for corridors, hubs, evolving neighborhood, and protected major transit station areas. Staff are also looking at secondary plans to ensure they are consistent with the strategic growth areas. Next slide. The third category is major transit station areas. MTSAs are newly required by the PPS 2024. An MTSA is one category of a strategic growth area, and an MTSA is between a 500 and 800 meter radius of an existing or planned higher order transit station, which includes Ottawa's O train stations and our BRT stations. The PPS establishes minimum density of 160 residents and jobs per hectare for each MTSA. Any exceptions can only be approved by the minister, whereby we would need to demonstrate that there are severe restrictions in the MTSA, or if the MTSA contains a major trip generator, such as a shopping mall or park and ride. I'd like to note that all of the city's protected major transit station areas are also MTSAs as per the 2024 PPS. The difference is that PMTSAs also have additional inclusionary zoning policies, and we may need to have PMTSA boundaries expanded to meet the definition of MTSA. Next slide. The fourth category is employment areas. In 2023, the province amended the area of employment definition in the Planning Act, and the PPS 2024 policies for employment areas have been adjusted accordingly. Employment areas in Ottawa's official plan are designated as industrial and logistics and rural industrial and logistics. The new PPS scopes down the types of uses permitted in employment areas, explicitly prohibiting retail, commercial, or institutional uses. Removal of lands can occur outside of a comprehensive review process with conditions. Employment areas have protections under the PPS, such as conflicting uses to industrial uses being prohibited, proposed development nearby must not conflict, and strict criteria must be met before employment area lands are removed or converted. Next slide. The final category is agriculture. There's new policy requiring municipalities to use an agricultural systems approach. In addition to protecting prime agricultural land, we need to look at the system to which the agricultural sector relies, such as for transportation, processing, and packaging of food. The PPS 2024 also encourages municipally-driven initiatives to support and foster the prosperity of the agri-food sector. In addition, the PPS 2024 now permits one more dwelling unit on prime agricultural land. This should not be confused with permitting additional lot severances. Currently, we have permission for a primary dwelling unit and one additional dwelling unit, either a coach house or a secondary dwelling unit within the principal dwelling. The new PPS permits a principal dwelling and two additional dwelling units under certain conditions. Next slide. So staff recommendations for council are: 1, direct staff to draft amendments to begin the consultation process. 2, to receive this report and consider written and oral submissions for this meeting. And 3, to hold a joint PHC and ARAC committee meeting to consider amendments for PPS 2024 consistency in June. For administrative ease, we are also asking that the June meeting be
Mr. Chair, we've lost all audio on the virtual option.
For the benefit of those joining virtually and online, there's been some issues with internet connectivity in the room. Staff are currently resolving that, and we hope to restart the meeting shortly.
Check, check, check.
Test 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Test 1, 2, 3. Can translation hear us?
Yes, we can. Very well.
Translation can hear you.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience and for bearing with us as we fix that audio issue. I'll give everyone 1 minute and then we'll resume our committee meeting. All right. Well, thank you very much again. And we'll resume with our delegation from Roger, John, and Dan. So, gentlemen, thank you for bearing with us, and the floor is yours.
La traduction va être nécessaire pour la
The
présentation.
translation will be necessary for my presentation at the beginning. I'll try to go slowly so that the translator can follow. My name is Roger Trudel. I'm a lawyer.
Depuis bientôt 40 ans de l'association à Orléans qui s'appelle l'Association des propriétaires du quartier Prézo. Il s'agit de cet endroit de l'arrondissement, comme on dirait en France, qui comprend les rues Saint-Pierre, Saint-Pierre, la rue Maisonneuve.
We say in French include Saint-Pierre, Gabriel, and Rock Streets. It's caught in a sandwich between Orleans Place and Saint Joseph. If you know Orleans a bit, you'll understand.
For the registry office, for people who will know the registry office plans of the city of Ottawa, it's considered to be Plan 86, one of the oldest plans in the city of Ottawa, or in the Gloucester area. The takeaway from this meeting will be that after having been extremely preoccupied with the down zoning that was announced with some resolution back in what is it now, in the fall of 2022, reducing down zoning, I would say, the area from 13-story or 40 meters to an average of 5 and 6 stories or 4 and 6 stories. We gladly hear that read, and on the assumption that our reading is correct and that this is not a dream come true. We gladly read something to the effect in the second amendment to the second draft of the new zoning bylaw of the City of Ottawa, the official plan of the City of Ottawa, that we are now back in what's called the N for neighborhood 6, which gives us back our 40-meter capacity to build buildings. As I say, this is the takeaway from this presentation, is just that. Anything else is just sidelines. And the reason I mentioned that is that the letter that was sent to council indicated that the City of Ottawa should pay attention to what we were calling at that time the provincial planning statement, en français, la déclaration provinciale sur la planification, which stated that there should be high densities close to transit stations. And here we were, instead of having an increase of density, there was downzoning from 13 stories to 4 stories. So perhaps we wanted to play smart and identify to the City of Ottawa that someone should have been doing their homework. We stand corrected on that because it's only on the 20th of March that we were able to read that new plan, the new official plan, and it only came to our attention after the sending of the letter. All of it to say that the takeaway is that we gladly applaud the efforts of the planners of the City of Ottawa, and Mr. Daniel Raymond is one of the strong members of the association, and Mr. John Castles can take over the microphone to identify the importance of this area. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Yeah, I'm not a resident of the association. I'm a development real estate agent, just work in infill development. That area next to the Saint Laurent Mall, the Perceau district that he's talking about, is, I think, probably the most developable area in, actually right around the Orleans town center. And I've done this, I've looked at it actually block by block, looking for a kind of notable local developer who does, let's say, very high intensity work. We did a complete inventory of everything, say, in the mall and the neighboring town center, and including conversations with the owners. And when you go through that, you look at it, it's pretty clear there's not going to be a whole lot of opportunity over the next 10 or 15 years, say, for people to develop that area deeply. The other thing that's interesting about the Perceau district is the age of the buildings. If you stretch out any farther from the town center, which, by the way, is mostly, it's mostly commercial buildings that aren't doing bad. If you ever tried to find parking there, it's not easy. Like, there's not a whole lot of reason to go in there and demolish it. It would be economically very difficult. But if you stretch out farther from there, Orleans is a suburb that was built recently. Most of the homes are recent. They're not land value. And development is enough of an edge case right now that when you start talking about demolishing valuable buildings, it really isn't, it's really hard to make it work. I mean, there's a reason it's never done. But the homes in the Perceau district uniquely are fairly old. They range from being about 100 years old to kind of 60 or 70 years old. Importantly, and in keeping with the development trends around that time, the lots are also larger, which means you need fewer of them to assemble to make it. Sorry. As I mentioned, the whole area is encompassed by a 600-meter buffer from within the LRT. So it really doesn't make any sense to leave these single-family homes, or even to have, say, modest density of like 4 stories, which is allowed in a lot of places now. It wouldn't be unique for the LRT and not suitable for it. A third characteristic that I think is unusual is that the association is here actually in favor of development. I find that it's almost always the opposite. And in this case, it's extremely unique. Next one is the amenities. In my view, and I think the city has the same view, is that when you look at the Orleans Town Center, it's probably one of the most walkable neighborhoods in the city. Like, apart from Westboro and maybe the Glebe, if you were to say next to Place d'Orleans, where can you really find that many amenities and that sort of density? You have the mall, you have the town center, and then you have interesting businesses up and down St. Joseph's. And you don't have that kind of combination. You have the mall out, let's say by Saint Laurent maybe, but you don't have the also interesting Main Street along with it. In any case, even if you're including other malls there, it's not very common. You could live there and not need a car very easily. And the final important point is, if you're familiar with Orleans at all, it's almost entirely Lita clay, which makes development beyond this kind of development at like sort of 5 stories or like the higher end of the range that would have previously been permitted. Kind of tough because the buildings get a little bit too heavy and they'll sink in the clay. You either need to stay like 1 or 2 stories or you have to go all the way up to 10. Otherwise, it just doesn't work economically, except for right around the town center. There is a small patch of bedrock that extends right up to Bilberry Creek. So it goes past the Brasseau district and then goes to the far end of the town center. That's really the only place where you can have density that isn't. If you go beyond 10 stories, you have to go up to 25 in order to justify the cost of digging down to bedrock. But where you could have that sort of middle density of 10 to sort of 14 stories, as it sounds like it's being brought back onto the table, it's really the only place where it's viable. I think it's a really easy move. You just have to keep the existing zoning that's been there for a long time. The residents want it. It's one of the only places where it can happen, and it makes the most sense to have it there. There's the amenities and the distance to transit. I think it makes a pile of sense, and there aren't many other opportunities to actually densify the area right now. Anyway.
Thank you very much. Councillor Luloff has a question for the delegation. Councillor?
Merci beaucoup pour votre témoignage.
Thank you very much for your testimony today.
It's been quite a process to get to this point, and I've really appreciated the engagement with the planning staff of the community association. You are right to point out that the Prézot district is probably the portion of the economic corridor that is best suited for intensification. For years, this beautiful little neighborhood has required upgrades to infrastructure and whatnot. It is essentially a small rural village. It's the beginning of Orleans, and rightly, as the witness pointed out, where we get our name, La Paroisse Saint-Joseph and Saint-Joseph d'Orléans. Very pleased to see that the community association still continues to support intensification along this corridor. It was a neighborhood that was looked at very closely by Steve Willis, Robin Vanderland, and others when we were working on the economic corridor study. To see the kind of amenities and density that we'll be able to achieve along this corridor will add greatly to the richness of life along our main street. So glad to hear that the community is being so vocal about this. So thank you for coming out today. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the continued intensification along Saint Joseph, the improvements that we're going to be able to make to that amenity space, the complete street that's been envisioned for this, and the walkable community that will be able to make use of the billions and billions of dollars that we've spent on the LRT. We're starting to see some of this development come in right now at the corner of 3030, corner of Difford and Saint Joseph, and very much looking forward to seeing that continue within the Prézot district. It is time for the oldest area of Ward 1 and a portion of it in Ward 2 as well to grow up, and very excited to see that. So thank you very much for coming out and speaking to this today. This is certainly going to be an exciting couple of decades for our Main Street.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much for coming and delegating today.
If I may just add, I'm one of the residents in that area. I grew up in that area, so I know it very well. My name is Dan Raymond, and I want to give you thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents in that area. We have residents that are getting up in age. Some of them are not, they wouldn't be able to be mobilized to be here in the first place. So I want to thank you for that, members of the committee and Mr. Chair. And if I may add, also another point is that a lot of these areas are built. So there's existing homes, some at different stages of condition. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that the fabric of the area, if you look at a Google map, it shows that there are some lots in there that are semi-detached or a little bit smaller than others. But what you have to realize is that some owners and multiple owners in there have bought multiple units and they're adjacent to one another. So if you look at a map, it shows a small lot. But the reality is you might have 4 or 5 or 6 lots owned by one owner. So it actually, the fabric is such that it's a lot bigger than what it looks like. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move to our next delegation, Jason Burgraff, and I see Ursula is online, but when Jason gets up to the mic here, I'll just confirm that you're both delegating together. Yeah, I'm getting the thumbs up, so perfect. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much, everybody. I'll be relatively short, I think, and maybe a bit muddled as I integrate information that we've kind of just been pulling from staff just before this really started. We certainly agree that the updates are necessary. There's still a lot of concern, though, that the proposed timeline is very short for consideration of the changes and adequate consultation with stakeholders and the public. I mean, you're looking at policies in the official plan to make it compliant with the PPS over an extremely wide range of issues, as was detailed with staff. You're, maintaining a sufficient supply of land, identifying strategic growth areas, identifying major transit station areas, updating employment areas, updating agricultural policies, and an OPA Omnibus 3, all in a 2-month time frame. For comparison, Omnibus 2 OP amendments, that process was nearly 4 months long and included multiple rounds of comments between stakeholders and staff before it went to Public House and another joint committee meeting like this one. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a criticism of staff in any way. We certainly appreciate the pressure that they're under in delivering on these items, and we always look forward to working with them and have a long history of doing so in a very constructive manner. But very concerned that the importance of these amendments is really constricted by the time frame that we're looking at here. We had, in our written submission, we're urging to have at least a couple of rounds of consultation where, again, we can kind of take the draft language, give us a bit of time to look at it, return it to staff with comments and suggestions, and then staff and GOBA, as we typically do, would come back, have that conversation about, what each is looking for and, what's agreeable, what's not, what could be modified. That is a significant amount of work just to try to get that done in 2 months. Plus, then you're adding in a very similar thing on zoning, which all the comments are due by June 30th, as well as TMP supposedly around the same time. Plus, then multiply that by other organizations like FCA and others who are trying to all do this in the same constrained time frame. So I understand from Mr. Moody that the draft language will come out April 17th. So we're talking about a week from now, and then we're really looking at a 2-month timeframe. If Chair, you said June 18th is sort of the next joint committee, so I'm assuming that's for this delivery. Having all these things in this timeframe, things are definitely going to slip through the cracks, and I really am concerned about how much attention we can ourselves, yourselves, staff, everybody can put a look on these items when they're so critical. We don't see the need to have these particular amendments done by the end of June. I don't quite appreciate what the rush is to do that, especially when there's so many other things on the table at once. So I'll leave my comments at that. Again, Ursula has joined me to answer any questions and appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Jason. And Ursula, if you do have anything you'd like to add to Jason's delegation, feel free to jump in. And if not, Councillor Leeper has his hand up. So go ahead, Councillor Leeper. I'm not seeing Ursula come up here.
No worries. Thank you. So Jason, what would be a reasonable period of time?
So like I said, Omnibus 2 was 4 months long, and in a much smaller package of things that were reviewed overall. I appreciate that pushes us into the summer. So be it. As my understanding of our legislative obligations is that it has to be, the OP has to be aligned with the PPS within a year's time of its adoption. So realistically, I think the city has until the end of October. And trust me, it feels very strange to recommend lengthening things out when I often come here asking to speed them up. But I appreciate the irony in that, but it's a process that's so super critical, and frankly all I see is maybe we do this process and we're just going to end up doing more omnibuses come in the fall and extend it out because of these things that we have to kind of mop up after the fact.
Because some of the conformity exercise, if I understand what is being contemplated, would become it would result in a more permissive official plan. Particularly expanding as new strategic growth areas, for example, would be. So you're asking us to wait a bit before we do that.
Just let's give it the due work that it deserves. Okay. For sure.
So Omnibus 3. You're not in a rush for Omnibus 3. You'd be happy to put that off for a bit.
At the it's really critical to get these things correct.
The June meeting, I think, is going to be critical for us to get a handle on urban boundary expansion. I don't think I'd want to see that go past June. Would you be okay with an approach that sees some things carved off until the end of the summer, early fall?
Yeah,
and some of the things move forward.
Yeah, if we wanted to chunk things out, that would be amenable, I think, overall. We're not trying to actually put more pressure on staff and the city in general. We're actually trying to kind of give them a bit of breathing space, right, to get these things correct.
Okay. I'll have a conversation with staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you very much for coming out today, Jason.
Thanks very much.
We'll move to questions to staff. Councillor Leeper, you're up first.
So how do you respond to Mr. Burgraff?
So chairs, there's a few things. Lorraine took us through the high level of the areas in the PPS we'll be looking at. A lot of those topics we've already covered in the official plan. So for example, on settlement area expansion, we are just updating the policies in the official plan to mirror what's in the provincial policy statement. We know what those are now, and we have that process that council adopted in October. So that will not be a significant undertaking by staff. In terms of strategic growth areas, those will largely be hubs, main streets, and minor corridors, which are already shown on volume 1. And we have the major transit station areas. We know the station and stop locations. We know the catchment areas of between 500, 800 meters. A lot of those also mirror what are PMTSA's, protected major transit station areas today, and hubs and main streets. So there's a lot of overlap with what's already in the official plan. We're looking at rounding those out to fill in the gaps. In terms of employment area consistency, our new official plan for industrial and logistics, I would say, covers off more than 90% of what the PPS 2024 already requires for employment areas. Again, there's just a few policies rounding out in terms of whether a major office building that's also close to a transit station can also be located within an employment area or not. And those are the policies would be updating. And then there's some discussion on updating permitted residential dwellings on agricultural lands from 2 in the official plan today to 3 with the PPS, with the conditions that are identified in the PPS. A big driver of the staff's aggressive timelines is a zoning bylaw, is a new zoning bylaw, and that work plan. So staff is proposing to bring back the final draft of the zoning bylaw to joint committee in December with adoption by council in January. What staff is proposing are any amendments related to strategic growth areas and MTSAs. Those policies would be sort of that phase 1 look and adoption by joint committee and council in June. We would then draft the zoning to implement those policies and insert them as part of the consultation process in draft 3. So we're not really looking at consulting on any official plan amendments, secondary plan amendments, and zoning by June. It's really the latter two, of which a lot of the work's already been done in the new official plan. If we hold off on having the amendments come forward to a later date, the implementing zoning will not likely make it for council's consideration in new zoning bylaw, and that may delay further the implementation of the affected zoning for the MTSAs until after the new zoning bylaw is in force.
If we were to have the implementing policies in the OP by mid-October, I think I'm struggling to understand how the zoning that flows from that couldn't be ready before the third draft comes to committee and council.
So just to back up, in order to prepare draft 3 for public consultation in September, because of translation and accessibility requirements, that draft actually has to be finalized in July.
Okay.
The other thing that Joint Committee should be aware of is that a Section 26 amendment under the Planning Act is subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and they will require a turnaround time as well after council adopts. And the minister also has the ability to make any changes to the amendments. So we're in a bit of a really tight buffer if we're looking at a fall adoption and then waiting for minister approval, and then the zoning bylaw is on deck in December for Joint Committee in January in council.
So that third draft CZBL, the target is to have that out for consultation in September.
That's correct, but that's what we're targeting with a June timeline for Joint Committee for the amendments in the official plan. That would translate to a September consultation for the implementing zoning bylaw.
Yeah, because it would be inappropriate to predict what those OPAs would be and draft a CZBL that isn't compliant until those OPAs are actually in place.
There would be considerable risk on implementing zoning that may not be implementing a change to an official plan amendment.
Yeah, and Omnibus 3?
Omnibus, so staff's proposing to include Omnibus 3 with this official plan amendment just for administrative ease. We could separate Omnibus 3, that just would require a separate official plan amendment. Omnibus 3 are meant to be minor corrections in secondary plans. There might be some designations that have a label that's outdated, such as an employment area in a secondary plan. We don't have employment areas in our volume 1 official plan anymore. We call them industrial logistics. That's just an example of some of the cleanup.
Okay. Let me chat further with you before council on Omnibus 3 and the timing, because I know, we are generally very amenable to passing the Omnibus amendments that you propose, but I know that there's always 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of those that become the subject of really intense discussions, and it is a very tight timeline. So, but maybe is there the potential in the course of Omnibus 3 that the 85 or 90% of them come to us in June, but that you defer consideration of the ones that become subject to the requirement for more consultation?
So chairs, we're in committee's hands for that. Staff can certainly take that direction.
Okay. Are there any hands up? Yep. I'll go off for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. I think Chair Leeper covered pretty much what I was going to. And I want to make sure I'm understanding. So there's 5 categories of changes that you've identified. The one that is linked the most closely to potential changes in zoning in the new zoning bylaw would be the major transit station areas. And so there is an urgency in completing that work and consultation. The other 4 areas are relatively minor or anticipated to be relatively minor in terms of changes. And not only that, don't have as big of an impact on the zoning bylaw. Is that right?
Staff would agree with that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And then I maybe suggest then going back to Mr. Bergeraff's notes, I suppose if in those 4 other areas, there are significant issues arise that weren't anticipated, there could be a possibility to extend consultation on those items, maybe into the fall or depending on what issues come up and what impacts they may or may not have on the zoning bylaw, there could be flexibility on timelines if need be for consultation.
That's correct, chairs. The only exception might be the settlement area expansions. We might want to get those policies in place so that we can properly assess applications for those expansions.
Okay, thank you. And we'll hope that the province doesn't make any additional changes to planning in the meantime. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gower's line of questioning helped a little bit, but I'm still kind of having trouble understanding the strategic growth areas. 2 of the 8 are in Ward 19. Your slide said these are areas for intensification and higher density mixed uses. But we met yesterday and you confirmed that increases in densities is not what is being proposed through this update. So can you just maybe articulate what the change is here?
So chairs, strategic growth areas are where you want to focus growth. In this case would be intensification. That could occur at a variety of scales. So for example, hubs and main streets are strategic growth areas. So we would see the majority of our high-rise type of development goes within those areas. Other areas might be evolving neighborhood or neighborhood that could be considered within a strategic growth area. I think the key there might be that we may not necessarily be looking at high rise, but it might be an alternate form of low rise. So it really depends on the circumstance and the situation of the area.
But I guess this rebranding of a strategic growth area does not automatically increase the permissions from what we were seeing in the official plan.
That's correct. We would like to undertake that review just to verify what areas staff still feel appropriate for any uplift, consistent with the PPS. Some areas may not.
Okay. But in some cases in these areas, you could see a change from industrially zoned land to residential. So in theory, that could be a net increase of units.
So chairs, just to clarify, staff's not looking to convert industrial lands as part of this process. We'd be updating our policies to allow for an application to consider a conversion of industrial lands, and then committee would be able to make a decision on that application.
Okay, so any change of that order would still come before committee.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you. I've just been noodling what potential direction I could provide around Omnibus 3 that you wouldn't already be doing. But with respect to my intention that you would come to us at the time of Omnibus 3 in June with a recommendation to defer some of the Omnibus considerations to a later meeting until there's been further consultation. Is there a form of direction that you would need to take to do that, or is that just going to be normal course?
Chair, I wonder if it might be a discussion that's more appropriate to have as we get closer to that point in time to identify where there are areas of contention within Omnibus 3 that might benefit from that deferral, right? We may get to that point and only have 1 or 2 items or none, hopefully. And if that's the case, then there may not be a need to defer.
Okay, I don't think there's any direction that would be useful today in the context of that response. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just ask one more time if there are any other questions to staff. I have one, but I'm happy to go last if someone else has one. Not seeing any. Of concern, certainly to me, is the opportunity for applicants to apply to expand village boundaries. I understand we have to create that process, but I'm hoping staff can outline the robust set of guardrails we're going to have around an application of that nature. The one thing that I certainly would be looking for is to ensure that servicing in these villages is appropriate to ensure that when we build these communities, the amenities that have to come along with them will. I know right now in Richmond, Manotick, two fastest growing villages in the city of Ottawa. We're starting to see some of those challenges. So I just want to know how that process is going to unfold and what we're looking at doing through this process.
So chairs, the process exists, would largely continue, and in a nutshell, staff would be looking at consistency with the provincial policy statements today for those expansion areas. We are just sort of dotting our I's and crossing our T's to ensure that our policies and official plan, which does not contemplate these applications, we just would have to reword them so that they're consistent with the PPS and the approach that council has adopted. So the same criteria in terms of appropriate servicing, the need for the proposed lands, those would still be there under the PPS.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Seeing no other questions, the report recommendations that the Joint Planning and Housing Committee and Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council. 1, direct staff to draft amendments relating to the planning matters described in this report and begin the consultation process. 2, receive this report on the revisions to the official plan that may be required and consider written and oral submissions and discussions of the public as per section 26(3) and 5 of the Planning Act. 3, delegate to a joint meeting of Planning and Housing Committee and Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee the authority for the following items to be held in succession at a meeting preferably in June 2025. A, the public meeting under section 17 of the Planning Act for the purposes of considering the official plan amendments required to be consistent with the provincial planning statement 2024, and B, the special meeting required under section 26 of the Planning Act for the purposes of discussing the revisions to the official plan that may be required as part of the growth projections update, which separate from the contents of this report and is a separate amendment process. Is that carried? Thank you very much. Any notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting? Not seeing any hands. Any inquiries? Not seeing any. I guess we'll stand adjourned, and our next meeting is Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. Thank you very much, everyone.